Imagine if you had known Bitcoin was going to be such a big thing and invested in it at the right time. Imagine if you had known before Apple, Google, or maybe even Amazon were big things. You had invested in them. And these massive companies that they are today, obviously one day started off so little. And it is the most successful investors that identified the right companies to invest in at the right time, when they're cheap and not so big, but they know they're going to grow. And the way they evaluate these companies is often, these are two main ways. They look at the growth prospect of the company. So say the company is really small right now, but they know it has a good business plan, so they look at its business plan, and they also look at its board of directors sometimes to check if they're trustworthy. If they've got experience in the field that the business is going into, then they might be better in going into this market and actually doing well in this market, so therefore the company would do well. So growth is a good way to look at whether the business will do good or not, because obviously if you're investing $10, you don't want those $10 to remain $10. You want to make your money grow, and you want growth of the company, because that's the only way your 0.01% of the company will grow in value. And then you also have to look at the value of the stock you're buying. If you think right now that the company should be valued at $10, but people don't demand it as much as you do, because perhaps you've evaluated the company and you think it has a high growth potential, but other people haven't, and therefore the price is only at $6, but you think it should be at $10, then you would buy it, because if you're thinking you'll grow to $15, you're paying $4 less for this $5 growth that you were going to get within a year. However, if you were in a scenario where you thought it had great growth potential and you thought it could go from $10 to $30 in a year, but people had already recognized that and they also agreed with you, and then there was a lot of demand for that share, the share of that stock, so it was priced already at $29, then you might spend your money elsewhere, because if you spend this $29 and you're only getting a $1 increase, you might have better investment options and you might want to invest in other places. So just to re-emphasize how profitable investing is for some people and how quickly companies grow, I'll use the example of Amazon for a company and Bitcoin for a cryptocurrency. So Amazon, we've got here, we all know Amazon. It has the NASDAQ ticker. Ticker is the symbol on the stock exchange that the company is known by. I've covered this in the previous video, investing, speculation, and the stock market. Do be sure to check that out because it's very useful just generally, and it's very useful for understanding this video. And NASDAQ is a stock exchange in America. We'll talk about what it means in more detail later. It started off, Amazon, in 1997, valued at $1.49. And just less than half a year ago, on the 31st of August 2018, the value of it increased to $2,012.71. That is just over 1,370 times increase. So say you were to invest $10,000 today, that would multiply into $13.7 million. $10,000 in 1997, and this is in 2018. And this is a massive increase. This just goes to show that if you invest in the right thing, it can be very rewarding. And now we'll take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin on the 25th of June 2016, one Bitcoin was valued at £492, but on the 16th of December 2017, it was valued at almost £15,000, which is an approximately 30 times a 30-fold increase, which means that, say you had invested that $10,000 this time without waiting for 20 years. If in fact you didn't even need to wait 2 years, you would go from $1,000 or $10,000. If we made that, you'd go to $300,000. However, investment isn't just straightforward. You put your money into anything and you get money back. It's not like that. You have to do proper research into the company and make sure that you're investing in the right company. And only if you invest in the right companies at the right time will your investment be profitable. And there's quotes like, even the best investors aren't the ones that will get a good investment 9 out of 10 times. They're the ones that will get a good investment maybe 6 out of 10 times. Investment isn't something you can expect to get right 10 out of 10 times. It is risky, and many people recommend, and I'll recommend, that you have to check your financial situation and everything before you take out any money to invest whatsoever, because it's something with no guarantee of how much you will get back. So as I said, we'd cover, but this isn't strictly necessary, so you can skip this part if you want, but it is informative. NASDAQ stands for National Association of Securities Dealers, Automated Quotations. A national association is very straightforward, not much to do with economics, but securities are any type of financial instrument that has some monetary value, that is worth some money. And a financial instrument is a term that just means any asset, so essentially anything that can be traded. For example, a share of a company on a stock market is a financial instrument and is also a security because it has some monetary value. And automated quotations means a computerized system is used which provides up-to-the-minute quotations for the prices of securities on a stock exchange. So that just means that every minute, based on the supply and demand, the price will change. In the last few videos, we have been talking about investing, and in this video in particular, we'll be focusing on a new technology that's recently come out and is quite relevant to our time. It's a new science, and that science is called CRISPR. Hi, I'm Ansh, and today's video is about CRISPR and what it means to investors. But first of all, to start off, mainly in this video, what we'll be doing is focusing on what the technology actually is, and then its advantages and disadvantages. We've looked at already, we've had a recap of investing. We'll be now explaining the technology that CRISPR is, and then we'll be looking at its advantages and disadvantages and how that's good or bad for investors. And we'll be also having a follow-up video on this shortly, which will just explain more about companies that are working in the field of CRISPR. Arguably one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs of our time, but also arguably useless and lacking the potential to actually work and be an efficient gene editing mechanism. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. However, if it actually does work, it has the potential to create a world free of disease, which is a massive thing to even think about at this stage, which is why investors need to evaluate how likely the success of these companies working with CRISPR is and need to invest accordingly. So we'll start by looking at what the technology actually is. Genes serve as instructions for every living organism on Earth and are essentially the building blocks. And they themselves are made up of DNA. And DNA have these kind of steps called base pairs. And this is because they're made up of two, so they're the pairs, made up of two chemical bases out of adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. And adenine goes with thymine and guanine goes with cytosine, and they make up these base pairs. And this combination of these base pairs is what makes the DNA. And the DNA is essentially this double ladder structure over here. Clustered is just close together. Regularly interspaced means every so often, regularly, there will be some spacer DNA between the base pairs. And spacer DNA is just DNA that does not provide instructions for building proteins. Base pairs provide instructions for building proteins, spacer DNA doesn't. Short palindromic. Palindromic means when they're read, they read the same forwards as backwards. So here we've been looking at the DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, which is what DNA stands for. But a human gene, the whole gene can consist of anywhere between 200 and 2 million of these base pairs. So moving on, we've just talked about base pairs and DNA, but sometimes this DNA might be faulty, or in simple terms, incorrect, and this is what causes faults and mutations in the genes, which leads to diseases and illnesses. And this is what CRISPR gene editing tries to fix. So you've got a DNA sequence like this, just as an arbitrary example. And then perhaps this part is faulty. And CRISPR is the idea where we cut this out, and there's three main things we can do, which we'll talk about in the other videos with a bunch more detail. Either they can just cut it out and leave it like this, so they've cut out the mutated gene, which should fix it, or they could fix it by inserting the correct gene, whatever should be there. Or what they can do is they can so they can insert the correct gene, they can leave it with nothing there, or they can let it regrow correctly itself. So rather than them immediately inserting the correct gene, or rather than immediately inserting the correct base pairs, I should say, they will just let the DNA regrow correctly. And this CRISPR idea was actually first gained from seeing the activity in bacteria and what they do. So bacteria uses a cutting enzyme. Cas9 is the name of a cutting enzyme, which is very key to CRISPR, and it's used a lot in CRISPR. And the bacteria we're just taking the example of is Streptococcus pyogenes. And they use this cutting enzyme to, when they were invaded by a virus, and when they defeated the virus, what they do is they'd take a part of the virus's DNA and incorporate it into their own DNA. So next time they were invaded by the virus, they could easily defeat the virus because they already had a part of its DNA sequence. What it then does is it takes some guide ribonucleic acid, and this is often abbreviated to RNA, and it joins it with the Cas9 enzyme. So in the DNA sequence, the guide RNA will essentially, in simple terms, indicate where the DNA sequence needs to be cut, and the Cas9 enzyme can cut it there, and it will cut it here. And or if the virus comes back, then since bacteria has defeated it before and incorporated it part of the DNA sequence into its own DNA, it knows where it needs to cut the virus's DNA in order to defeat the virus again. And this same idea can be used in CRISPR, which is why it has the potential to be such a significant technology, since it can save the lives of many if it can defeat viruses and other illnesses like this. So we're coming towards the end of the video, but now we will be looking at the advantages and the disadvantages, which are very important, and especially because, remember, this is anti-economics, so we're looking at it from a investor's view, and obviously investing has a lot to do with economics. They need to know all about the money and the stock market and shares and supply and demand and all of that. So, but remember, all of this needs to be treated with an open mind, because this is a new technology, and I'm not saying that it works well, I'm not saying it doesn't work well, it's just something that we don't know, and every investor will have to make their own judgment. So first of all, we'll look at the advantages. Other gene editing technologies have come about before, such as ZFN, zinc finger nuclease, and TALEN, transcription activator-like effector nuclease. And CRISPR is 80% cheaper, which gives it a cost advantage, and it's also simpler. It's a simpler technology. And CRISPR can be used to target multiple genes at the same time. All you need to do is have multiple guide RNA. These two lead to a quicker gene editing process than other gene editing technologies, because you can do multiple at the same time, and it's quicker because it's simpler and cheaper. Furthermore, since it's cheaper with the same amount of money, more genes can be edited or fixed. So now we're moving on to the disadvantages. So first of all, one disadvantage is that we don't know enough about what happens after the editing. And this is following a study published on July the 16th, 2018. And it says that the CRISPR gene editing technology can cause unintended deletions and rearrangements. In tests carried out, some of the genetic changes had occurred far away from where the CRISPR tools had actually cut the genome. So this is links in with this, and that means that we don't know where to look because they're essentially saying that the faults or the unintended deletions could have occurred anywhere, and this means that it's not a proven, mature, or reliable technology yet. And although companies have established themselves in this field, and there's three main biotechs we'll talk about later, the technology isn't proven yet, and we don't know if, like ZFN and Talon, we will find a better technology after this, or this technology might end up being just disproven and not allowed to be used anyway. But nevertheless, it still has massive growth potential if it is deemed safe, and could be a great chance for investors to make money if they invested it at an early stage, but it is of course quite risky. Furthermore, the two bacteria most commonly used for the Cas9 cutting enzyme are Streptococcus pyogenes, which we looked at earlier, and Staphylococcus aureus, and these both have infected humans for a long time. So obviously this links in with the fact that they could have antibodies for the Cas9 enzyme. This means that when they use the Cas9 enzyme, it won't work because the human's immune system will just counter that. This was also mentioned and a point raised in a study done in January in 2018 by Stanford University, but what many people are saying in response to that is the Cas9 enzyme could also be developed in bacteria that haven't affected humans. So this could be a solution to that problem. So I think I've used the word genome at least once, maybe a couple of times. All that genome means is just genetic material or genetic information held within a cell or an organism. Genetic information. Three good biotechs working in this field right now are Editas Medicine, CRISPR Therapeutics, and Intellia Therapeutics. So please search them before the next video where we will be talking a lot more about them and their work and what they aim to do in the future, and maybe search their partners or how they're aiming to achieve, and maybe it will give you some scientific explanations as to why they think what they're doing will work, to just give you a broader sense of why people believe CRISPR will work. But also many people believe CRISPR won't work, and if it's deemed unsafe, or if a better gene editing technology is discovered, such as ZFN and Talon are now not as commonly used because CRISPR was discovered, then it might not be the best investment opportunity. Thanks everyone, this is Anshu J Economics. Please make sure you look at and watch all of my other videos. They have very informative content, and it will be useful for economics, life, money managing skills, I guess, and almost anything in the future. Economics is useful generally, and especially for investors or people going into business, they would be very useful to just know at least some of the basic concepts which I have covered so far. And keep watching out for my future videos. I will do many more in the future, and they will get progressively harder and harder. Obviously the fundamentals are essential to understand the more complex topic.